It had been a day of giggles. Katie discovered that when Orbie tooted his favorite story in rhyme, it was really funny. And Orbie found out that when they played checkers with Dad, he made a whole lot of silly sound effects. And they both learned that if you put music on, Mom and Dad do some really crazy dancing. The family had enjoyed their Saturday together. Mom and Dad had spent the whole day doing Katie and Orbie things, but they were going out on a date together later that night. Mom served Katie and Orbie's supper early. They were just finishing dessert when the doorbell rang. Orbie whizzed out of the kitchen, opened the front door. Standing on the stoop was Tom with his girlfriend, Polly. They were going to babysit for the evening. Orbie hugged Tom and Polly and invited them in. When Mom and Dad came down the stairs, they all clapped. They looked fabulous. Mom had on a long gown. Katie couldn't even see her toes. Dad had on a black and white suit with a big wide belt. Dad explained it was called a cummerbund, and it kept him from falling out of the suit. Katie and Orbie giggled. They knew he was joking. Dad and Mom swept out the door looking a lot like a prince and a princess. Perhaps that was when Katie started thinking about beauty. When she turned around to Tom and Polly, she noticed how pretty Polly was. Her mom had looked beautiful in her dress, and Polly looked beautiful in her jeans and T-shirt. And Katie wondered what she could do to look pretty like them. As they played a game of charades, Katie looked at Polly's face. Her face seemed perfect to Katie. When charades ended, Katie went upstairs to get a book. It was going to be fun because Tom was almost as good at reading stories as Dad. She popped into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face didn't look beautiful at all. It looked, well, to Katie, it looked plain. Everyone else was much more beautiful than her. Even Orbie had spectacular pink spots. Sometimes Mom wore lipstick. Katie was sure Polly did too. Maybe if she put lipstick on, she'd be beautiful like Polly. In Mom's room, Katie found some red lipstick. She slid it across her lips as best she could. And when she checked her face in the mirror, she realized she still didn't look pretty like Polly. It seemed to Katie that maybe Polly also wore red stuff on her cheeks to make them stand out. Katie found some brownie red powder. It had a big fluffy brush with it. Katie put the powder all over her face to see if it would help her look beautiful. When she peered into the mirror, she thought it had helped a whole lot. But her eyebrows didn't seem to show up much. Katie drew a black pencil line around them. While it didn't look quite right, Katie thought it did make her look better. Then she thought she remembered Polly had eye color on her eyelids. She covered every inch of her eyelids with blue. Pleased with herself and feeling very pretty, Katie headed downstairs. Tom and Polly were reading a story to Orbie, making all kinds of funny voices. Orbie was laughing quite a bit, so when Katie walked in, he didn't even look up. He just waved his arm to Katie to come and sit with him. Tom was pretending to be the wicked wolf in the story. Just as he was making a very silly wolf sound, he looked up and he saw Katie. He was so shocked to see her with a whole lot of makeup on that he stopped in the middle of his growl, and that made Orbie and Polly look up too. Polly looked at Katie and smiled. Feeling very beautiful, Katie sashayed over to sit beside Orbie. He tooted that she had made a terrific clown face. Well, that shocked Katie. She looked at Polly. She noticed that she really didn't have colors on her face at all. And Katie's feeling that she looked beautiful turned into a feeling that she looked really silly. Orbie put his arm around Katie. He hadn't meant to hurt her. Katie felt too embarrassed to stay for a hug. She raced up to the bathroom and closed the door. Tom was really puzzled. It had been a great clown face. That should have made her happy. He started to get up to go to her. Polly asked Tom if she could go instead. She told Tom and Orbie that the problem was that Katie hadn't meant to make her face look like a clown. Tom and Orbie looked at each other, surprised. Gently, Polly knocked on the bathroom door. Katie didn't want to ever see anybody for the rest of her life, but she opened the door. As Polly walked in, Katie told her that it wasn't meant to be a clown face. Polly smiled and explained that she knew. Katie sighed that she just wanted to be pretty like her. With some warm water and soap, Polly carefully washed the makeup off and patted Katie's face dry with a little towel. Polly put her arms around Katie and turned her so they could both look in the mirror. Katie couldn't see where her beauty was, but Polly showed her. She told Katie that beauty came in all different kinds of packages. Katie had her very own kind of beauty. And yes, one day if she wanted to wear makeup, she could. But right now, she was just too beautiful to cover up. Katie was astonished and looked at Polly. "But I don't look like you," Katie told her. Polly smiled and touched Katie's nose. She was glad Katie didn't look like her. If everyone looked the same, it would be boring. Instead, Katie had her own original, made-to-order beauty that made her precious and pretty to everybody else. And for the first time that day, Katie looked in the mirror and saw that, in fact, the face looking back at her was pretty just the way it was. When Katie and Polly went downstairs, Tom and Orbie could tell everything was all right again. Tom told Katie that she looked much better. Orbie burbled that he hadn't meant to be unkind. She was very precious to him. She was happy that he liked her just the way she was. And I'm sure you know that you are unique and original, just like Katie. And even if you don't see it when you look in the mirror, you should know that I think you are truly beautiful.
Did you know? Going to a restaurant can be a special treat. There are lots of different kinds of restaurants that your family can visit. For a fancy restaurant, you'd better get dressed up and be on your best behavior. Some restaurants are not so fancy. And then there are some restaurants just for kids.